As we speak, the two banner characters are both fusion, and that got me thinking, how good is every fusion character in Wuthering Waves? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to be ranking every single fusion character. But let's think about it really quickly. What should we even look at when we're talking about how good a character is? Well, first of all, I want to say that this list is based on the scale of fusion characters themselves, and not where I would actually rank them on a genuine tier list. I'm simply trying to create a sense of scale between all of the characters. If a character is bad, I'll say it. If a character is really good, I'll say it. But here it's about the sheer comparison between the characters themselves. So who is better than the other? But with that out of the way, it's time to get talking about every single fusion character and where they rank. First of all, starting with Chixia. Now, Chixia is a character that has a very divisive kit. A lot of people seem to think that Chixia is really good for some reason, and a lot of people seem to think she's really bad for some reason. This amount of divisiveness is not shared by a lot of other characters. The only other character I can really look at and think, yeah, the opinions on this one are very varied, is Encore, and with him, it's all about him being hard to use. So, how about Chixia? What's the deal there? Well, I'm gonna say that both sides are not really that correct. Chixia is not a garbage character by any means. She can clear the content, and she is actually pretty decent. But it's not like she is some kind of insane crack DPS that some people like to believe she is. Definitely a lot of people overlook her, but the people that don't tend to go in very hard about liking Chixia. Now, when it comes to advantages that Chixia has, there is actually more than one, being the fact that she's free. But there's also the fact that because she is a pistol-based DPS, she has that range on her. And having range is actually very nice. At least she's not going to run into situations like Encore, where you're fighting Impermanence Heron and you lose 25% of your damage just because the Impermanence Heron decided to fly away from you. Chixia's not going to have that issue being a ranged character. And she's also very simple to understand. It's literally just, you charge your forte meter, and then you'll hold the E button. Wow, that is so very exciting. So she is easy to pick up, but she has a lot of issues, I'm gonna be real with you. First of all, her AoE is completely not there. Thank you pistol characters before Carlotta for having the worst AoE in the game. Her skill, aka her biggest damage tool, is entirely single target. And it's not like a Carlotta single target where you can pass through enemies if they're standing in a straight line. No, it's just straight up single target. You can literally only hit one enemy with this. And while Tower is mainly boss content, this makes you entirely bricked in Whimpering Wastes. Then there's also the fact that she has little to no options for parrying, which, considering the fact that you want to keep holding her skill until you're able to do the final hit, that is catastrophic for her, because dodging would interrupt her skill, and parrying is just not an option for her. And for all of that, she doesn't even do that much damage when compared to other DPS options. Sure, it may be unfair to compare a 4-star DPS to limited 5 stars, but that's just the name of the game. So, because she has literally almost no AoE outside of her ultimate, can't really do anything about enemies attacking her, and doesn't have that much damage to compensate, I'm gonna have to give Chixia a rating of C. Moving on to my absolute champion, the Mortefi man himself, the angry hater scientist. He's just like me for real for real. Mortefi as a character is actually incredibly well respected. He was one of the best characters back during 1.0 due to his synergy with the first limited 5-star being GN. Very nice. This instantly gave him a pretty good look from the eyes of the people, and I respect it. Mortefi has quite some things going for him. First of all, his Ultra skill is obviously the main reason most people are going to use him. 38% damage amplification to heavy attacks, when we have no other heavy attack buffer in the entire game, is quite a powerful niche to fulfill. And let's be honest here, he's always going to be the best in slot option for GN until at least a year from now. Kuro Games themselves have said that they consider GN to be complete, so don't expect to see a Mortefi upgrade anytime soon. Also, his pretty respectable damage output, combine that with sets like Empyrean Anthem, his S6 attack buff, and then also Static Mist, you get yourself a pretty good overall buffer. He has some pretty powerful generalist buffs. However, outside of GN teams, you're never really going to use him unless you're trying to play Hypercarry Phoebe and your Sanhua is already taken. Sure, he does have other teams like with Jinshi, but he suffers from the fact that he's not really the best in slot there. And even with GN, he is pretty replaceable. He might be the best in slot in tower, but Sanhua is not far behind, because Sanhua is just built different. And in Whimpering Wastes, you can easily just dual carry your GN with someone like Phoebe, and that's going to perform better, if not the exact same as running Mortefi. However, even with all those negatives, I think I'm going to give Mortefi an A. Him being very strong with GN, who I consider to be one of the best DPSs in the game, is a very valuable synergy to have. And the fact that he can also be used as a universal buffer, thanks to all of the attack buffing within his kit, it makes him a pretty good character. Next up is Encore. Encore is a character that has a pretty interesting relation with the community. A lot of people seem to overlook her, but those that don't can agree that she is a very strong DPS character, mainly for the Tower of Adversity. Encore actually has enough DPS to match that of GN, so when you're putting them both in an equal environment, they're going to clear about the same, which is very impressive considering the fact that Encore is a standard banner character, whereas GN is limited. So obviously you'd expect more of a power disparity. However, where that power disparity comes in is with the fact that Encore is mainly single target with like a little bit of AoE, whereas GN is a full-on AoE monster. So you can't really say that they're equal because Whimpering Waste exists now, so AoE is actually very relevant. There really isn't that much to say about Encore, to be honest. She's just a very solid DPS that is lacking in the AoE department, but has a lot of damage. Although it's not as much damage as a character like Camellia or Changli. Although one misconception that people do have is people seem to think that she's hard to play when she really isn't. It's literally just as simple as using your ultimate, using skill whenever it's off cooldown, and for the rest just spamming basics. It's not really that deep. So while I am going to be putting her in B tier, be very aware that the only reason this is happening is because the bar for fusion characters is actually pretty high. Speaking of the bar for fusion characters being very high, here is the bar in question being Changli. Changli is a character who, at release, wasn't really that impressive, but the more time went on, the better this character kept getting, which is because she is a master of the quick swap. If you're looking at a quick swap team, chances are you can upgrade it by just putting a Changli in there. And I'm being entirely serious here, this character is the backbone of the quick swap archetype. The sheer amount of teams this character can be played in is kind of nutty. On her release, she already had teams with Jinshi, Encore, and Kalcharo, but as time went on, we also got teams with Changli, which is when her quick swap capabilities became really popular, as well as getting Shorekeeper as a universal upgrade, and then also being played with Carlotta and Phoebe down the line, and most recently getting Brant, a character who perfectly buffs her hypercarry playstyle. The primary flaw that Changli had was the fact that she wasn't really that easy to play and was hard to access. However, now that we have Brant in the game, this is no longer as valid of a complaint as it used to be, because now you can just pull for Brant if you want to play a hypercarry Changli, and it's going to be very powerful. And it still doesn't annihilate the sheer amount of quick swap teams that Changli has, because, again, let me reiterate, you can play her with Havoc Rover, Kalcharo, Jinshi, Encore, Changli, Carlotta, Phoebe, and then you can also just quick swap with Brant. The sheer amount of teams this character has makes me think that putting her in anything except S would be a complete fraud moment. And now for the final fusion character currently in the game, Brant. Brant is in a lot of respects very similar to Changli, but is he the same? Not at all. Just like Changli, he can be played as a quick swap character. But unlike Changli, he doesn't really feel quite as smooth as Changli does in his teams. This is because Changli is a character who only really needs to swap in whenever her skill is off cooldown or she has true sight. So her field time is actually very minimal, whereas with Brant, you kind of want to be charging up his forte constantly. So Brant ends up demanding a lot more field time than Changli does, and thus ends up being harder to incorporate into your rotations. Now, he can also be used to buff Changli, but then again, you are playing him with Changli, which just proves her value even more. Now, Brant can buff characters like Jinshi and Carlotta as well, but these aren't really that powerful, at least compared to their best in slot supports. So, using Brant in these situations, while it is possible, isn't something that is going to give him much of a leg up over Changli. And while things like his shielding as well as his healing are pretty nice bonuses, there is no game mode in which these healing and shielding are quite as important as people like to pretend it is. So these aren't giving him many brownie points either. And this is not even talking about the fact that his anchor is shockingly easy to miss, it is shockingly easy to be interrupted during it, and if either of these happen, you just do not get the Concerto energy from it. So despite all of the positives that Brant has going for him, I'm still gonna have to put him in A. Do you guys agree with my list? And if not, be sure to comment down below why not. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, the best place to ask me would be to join my Discord. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask me a question, there's a pretty good chance I'll respond to it. But that'll be it from me. Peace.